8.6b is about work problems. Very simple problem, but there must be a level of understanding for it to work easily for you. So that's what this is about. Number one thing you need to understand, and this is a actual formula, is that the amount of work equals the product of rate and time. And in other words, the amount of work you do, or the amount of work done, is the product of how fast you work, which is your rate, multiplied by how long you work. So if you work at a fast rate, it means you don't have to work as long to finish the same amount. Whereas if you work at a slow rate, you have to work longer to finish the same amount. And so W equals RT, which is also like distance equals rate times time, is a formula that you don't use a lot, but on occasion it pops up and you need to understand how to use it. It leads us to a common sense question. If I can paint a room in 5 hours, what is my work rate? Well, work rate is based in hours, and you usually say per hour, which means your question is, how much of the room can I paint in 1 hour? Well, if it took me 5 hours to paint a room, then it should be 1/5 of the room, because 1/5 done 5 times is 1 room. So again, in terms of the common sense piece you need is, this number gives me my rate. If I know that I can paint a room in 5 hours, then I know my work rate is 1/5 of a room per hour. Again, it's the average rate, but again, that's pretty much what it is. So again, if I can paint a room in 5 hours, my work rate is 1/5 rooms per hour. So that would be my R. Next, we need to understand the problem and see what's going on. So if you have a problem where it says Sam can finish a job in 4 hours working alone, Michelle can finish the same job working 3 hours alone, how long will it take them if they work together? The first thing you need to understand is what it's telling you. It says Sam can finish a job in 4 hours. So the work rate, R, for Sam, that's a subscript, would be 1/4. If you don't understand that, make sure you email or text, whatever, and let me know so I can try to explain it to you. But again, he can finish 1/4 of the room per hour because it takes him 4 hours. Again, 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 is 1 room. Michelle can do the same job in 3 hours. That means Michelle's work rate, or R of Michelle, work rate of Michelle, is going to be 1/3. We know that work is equal to rate times time. So the question is, if they are working the same amount, do we need a T for Sam and a T for Michelle? No, because you can just use T. So again, we need a R for S, a rate for Sam, because Sam's rate is different than Michelle's rate. But they are both working the same amount of time, because once one finishes, both are finished. So again, T is just going to be my variable. So what we end up with is Sam's work rate, which is again what this means, that's subscript. So the work amount, using that W equals RT, work amount for Sam is equal to Sam's work rate times the amount of time they both work. Michelle's amount of work is equal to Michelle's rate times the amount of time that they work. Again, they're both working the same amount, and we do know that both of them are working together to equal how much work? Well, it would be 1, and that's because they're only doing one job. If it said Sam can finish in 4 hours, Michelle can finish in 3 hours, how long would it take for them to finish 7 batches? Then you'd put 7. How long for them to finish 5 batches? You'd put a 5. But again, if they're just working that same job, you're going to set it equal to 1. Alright, so this is our setup. This is what we're looking for in terms of being able to do. So again, we should know that Sam's work rate is rate times time. So you would do Sam's work rate times time plus Michelle's work rate times time equals 1. And so that is what we end up with. You don't need all that set up if you get used to what's going on. So again, Sam finished his job in 4 hours. That means Sam's rate is 1/4 times a certain amount of time, plus Michelle can do it in 3 hours, so 1/3 times the time is equal to 1. We understand from doing yesterday that there's fractions involved, so we need at least common multiple of 12. What's missing here is 3. What's missing here is 4. And what's missing here obviously is 12, because there is no denominator. We then multiply the top, ending up with 3/12, 4/12, 12/12, which, if you remember what we talked about yesterday, because all these are 12s, the only thing that's important is the top. So yesterday we didn't even write this, but I just wanted to make sure in this presentation that I showed you that I wasn't breaking any rules by rewriting this as common denominator. So again, 1/4 t, 1/3 t. Let me go back and show you that again. This was the original, but you cannot combine anything unless it has a common denominator. So we found a common denominator, which is 12. We then converted all these into fractions of 12 by multiplying the top and bottom by 3, the top and bottom by 4, and top and bottom by 12, and saying, who cares about the 12? This is all that matters anyway. Now you combine your like terms and you divide. T is equal to, now on your Math XL it wants a mixed number, so what you're going to say is 7 goes into 12 once with 5 left over, so it'll be 1 5/12 hours. And again, make sure it makes sense whatever answer you get, because if the answer you get is bigger than what someone works alone, it doesn't make sense. Or if it's 2 hours and you know she can do 3 hours alone and he's working 4, that also doesn't make sense. But again, 1 hour and 5/12, 7 hours sounds about right. And that is it. That represents all you need to know from Chapter 8. You are now finished with Chapter 8, which means that we will spend the last 4 weeks, I believe, working on Chapter 11, and I think we'll probably finish early based off of what I know. I will post questions tomorrow for those of you who are competitive and inquisitive and want to know how prepared you would have been. I think it'll be good for you to watch the video. Again, you do not need to do anything on that video, but just kind of watch it. And because you are in a higher track class, it's important that you kind of go through it and test your own memory and pause it in certain spots and say, yes, I agree with that, or email or text and let me know that there's an issue you're having with understanding something. There is no assessment on this. Again, I'm not going to assess you because you're in a 6-weight class. And because you're in a 6-weight class, there's certain things that take care of themselves. Because if you do not know how to do these types of problems, you're going to weed yourself out in the first semester next year anyway. Your teacher's going to expect you to know how to do things. Your habits are going to be off, and you're going to either fail or you're going to have to drop. So that means that you need to take the lesson seriously, which again, most of you do, and I get it. But you got to make sure that those of you who did not, that you learn from your mistakes. The reason I love math is because it's the only subject in which your grade actually represents what you know. There are 6 gauntlets that you must run in every math class, actually every class that you take, period. And by definition, because I like to make sure that I don't just speak in general, I looked it up. It's a form of punishment in the military where the person who was being punished had to run through 2 rows of men who struck at him with weapons. So he had to run through that row and make it through. And if you think about the math classes that or if you think about this class, some of you, you got halfway through the first quarter and you felt like quitting, but then you didn't quit. You kept going. You made it through. You were bruised. You were beaten, but you still survived. You moved on to the second quarter, and so on and so forth. But again, there are 6 things that you run through, and I want you to pay attention to what I'm saying here, because if you think about our class as it was and look back at this year with me, you'll see that there are people, actually in all your classes, if you're in all honors classes, there are people who did not make it through. The first thing is the first 4 weeks. That is, class starts, you start your habits, you wake up, you get yourself together, you get on the ball. There are people who fall out in the first 4 weeks, and I think you remember that because there are people who are not here right now who did not make it through that first 4 weeks because it was like, nope, I can't do this. This is way too serious. After the first 4 weeks, you got to make it through the first quarter, because there are people who barely made it through the first 4 weeks who then didn't pick it up, and then they fell off at the first quarter. First semester, because again, once you make it through the first quarter and you're there for the second quarter, you're kind of locked in, so you have that second quarter to make. But again, if you barely made it through the first quarter but you did not pick it up, then you end up failing the second quarter and then failing the final, and you fall out in the first semester. So again, you have to make sure that you're ready for that. Then the people who barely made it through this first semester have to now get through the first 4 weeks of the second semester, because again, you went home for winter break, you relaxed, you got your bad habits all back in place, and then next thing you know, you came back to school and you didn't do your job. Hint, hint, that's some of us right now. So first 4 weeks of second semester is where some people fall off, and again, they either leave or they stay stubborn and they just fall off anyway, because they're just kind of like, as they say in prison, a dead man walking. They're not going to make it out of the year anyway. The third quarter is your next part again. So for those of you who kind of barely make it through the first 4 weeks because you kind of pick it up, and then you barely make it through the third or through the rest of it, you fall out in the third quarter and then the second semester. So again, these are the points that you need to do. For those of you who have issues doing well in these honors classes, I would break this down because to me, that's what I focused on whenever I was working. I was like, I got to kill the first 4 weeks. As long as you kill the first 4 weeks, you will make it through the first quarter. If you kill your first 4 weeks, let me say that again, you'll make it through your first quarter. After your first quarter, you've got to now go for a quarter of work. But again, by the time you get through the first quarter, you've got a pretty good momentum to get through the first semester. After the first semester, everything starts over, so you've got to kill your first 4 weeks of the second semester. After you do that, you'll pretty much make it through your third quarter, and then from there you've got to work your way through the semester. So again, it's just something you got to be careful of. But again, I don't need to assess you on 8 and 11 because math is a subject of truth. You're only going to make it as far next year as your preparation for the rest of your classes. I want you to pay attention to the fact I did not say your level of talent. All of you are brilliant. All of you are smart. Your talent is not what gets you through all these classes. Your talent is not what gets you A's. It is a mix of talent, it's a mix of work ethic, it's a mix of discipline, it's a mix of desire. So you have to make sure all that's there. But you only have 3 questions on your Math Excel, and you are done. Again, if you want to log in some point tomorrow or over the break to kind of watch that video is going to be up pretty much for the rest of the year. But just check it out. Like I said, you don't need to write anything, but just kind of watch it and make sure that you remember what I was going to do or remember what you were supposed to do, because again, that is pretty much the test questions. It's not the official test because I'm going to change the answers, but it is the questions that represent what would have been on the test. So again, enjoy your break and have a good day.